Welcome to another one-on-one YouTube, and we are still here at the Texas Tribune Festival in Austin, which is now got scores, hundreds, I would say, of interesting and important speakers. I'm here with one of them, Amanda Tyler, who is the director of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, and in particular, the spearhead, I would say, although she has a pretty big staff, of the program Christians Against Christian Nationalism. So can I just start, Amanda? First of all,
Please.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for the invitation.
Give us a sense of, well, actually, let's start with terms. What's Christian nationalism?
So I define Christian nationalism as a political ideology and cultural framework that tries to merge our identities as Americans and Christians. And it's part of a larger phenomenon called religious nationalism that's been a recurrent problem throughout history and around the globe today. But in the American context, it suggests that to be a true American, one has to be a Christian, and really a particular type of Christian that holds fundamentalist religious beliefs that are often in line with conservative political values. It relies heavily on this mythology of the United States as a quote-unquote Christian nation, one that was founded by Christians in order to privilege Christianity and law and policy. And that mythological history is directly at odds with the constitutional history and the constitutional text itself, that has a secular government that stays out of religious affairs in order for religions of all kinds to flourish in private, without government control, in the public square, but without government control or denigration.
Right. You know, that's a meme that has been really sticky. And there's that one, you probably had to encounter the one kind of stray, what lawyers would certainly call dictum statement in a Supreme Court case from the late 19th century, that America is a Christian nation, and it does resurface. But I also feel that this basic debate plays out even today at the level of Supreme Court decisions, where you see the justices clearly they're disagreeing, but there's something fundamental that has to do with, I think, constitutional vision, whatever that is driving it. But I know you're a lawyer, but that's a little bit far afield. Just, so we're talking about things like the prayer on the 50-yard line, and I know chaplains are now having a bigger role in Texas public schools and the like. Let me just ask, I think it's a relatively new organization. What, compared at least to the Baptist Joint Committee, what gave you the sense of we need to create this? And what's your sort of broad kind of operational plan in the field of the country?
Yeah, so Baptist Joint Committee is a pretty old organization, 87 years old, headquartered on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., has done most of our education and advocacy work in the halls of power at Congress and in the United States Supreme Court, but a growing sense that those two institutions cannot alone protect religious freedom, and that the work of protecting religious freedom belongs with we the people, holding up these ideals of equality as Americans, regardless of religious belief, and a growing recognition that running against that was this powerful ideology of Christian nationalism. And then between 2015 and 2018, seeing how Christian nationalism was becoming increasingly violent, including in houses of worship. So looking at Mother Emanuel AME Church in 2015, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, and Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018.
My boyhood synagogue, by the way.
I did not yet. It was really Tree of Life, I think, which of course remains the deadliest attack on Jews in American soil ever, that just showed how deadly Christian nationalism was turning in this country, and a real driving sense that we all, and particularly Christians, needed to do something to both name Christian nationalism as the ideology and then equip people to have resources to work to dismantle it. And so soon after Tree of Life, we gathered in our conference room on Capitol Hill with an interfaith table. And it was our interfaith colleagues that said, we agree that Christian nationalism is an urgent problem. Something needs to be done about it. But you Christians are the ones who need to be leading this. One, because you can speak with more authenticity about how Christian nationalism is a gross distortion of the teachings of Jesus, but also because we simply don't feel safe in this society calling out Christian nationalism with the same kind of
Your
force.
colleagues from other
Jewish
disciplines were like, we're not, please do this for us because, and let me ask you that. I mean, obviously not all fundamentalists, including those who believe fervently in a more interventionist government with respect to religion and Christianity, have a propensity to violence.
Sure.
But yet, it's unmistakable that so many who do espouse violence come at it from some kind of religious vantage point. Do you have what is it that connects at the extremes Christian doctrine, the teachings of Jesus and the like, with actual, you can't think of a sort of more unchristian behavior than
Right.
right. And where's the distortion come from? Do you have a sense?
Well, I think in one sense, it's using the respectability of religion, of Christianity, which is the majority religion in this country, to give a permission structure to these violent and hateful acts. It cloaks the violence and racism and hatred with the divine favor of God, right? And so in a sense, we all, even those of us who would never commit such a violent act, we are complicit if we allow this ideology to go unchallenged. Because as I say, it's not the Christian nationalism itself that causes the violence, but Christian nationalism in the hands of a violent extremist turns deadly. And we see that in these awful attacks at houses of worship and in other community settings like the Top Supermarket in Buffalo and the Walmart in El Paso. Those are also examples where Christian nationalism, even if the perpetrator himself was not a Christian, but he's citing these Christian nationalist ideas as if he is carrying out something for the culture at large. And we also saw it on January 6th. We saw how Christian nationalism worked to unite all of these people who were coming from different groups with a common vocabulary and a common sense of destiny, that they were there in order to carry out God's will for the country. And we saw it with the symbols that were there on January 6th and the use of prayer and the use of worship songs, but also in all of those events that led up to January 6th and the Jericho marches. And
that's really, and sometimes there's I think a connection with the sort of end of days kind of branch of Christianity. Well, so I can understand this point of view. Please, Amanda, you guys, will you be out front? It's dangerous out there. Do you take your main sort of audience to persuade good believing Christians who have somehow acquiesced to the violent culture? Do you actually try to directly attack, not personally, of course, the more nationalist extremists? What's your sort of strategic vision for trying to make a dent here?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, we have to understand that Christian nationalism as an ideology operates a lot like racism in our culture. It's pervasive.
And as opposed to religion, right? An ideology rather than a religion. Is that fair?
I think so. Yeah. Although I will say that in some circles, American Christianity itself has become so infected by the ideology that it can be difficult to tell the difference. But just to live in our culture is to be affected by Christian nationalism. And so it is a spectrum. There are orientations to Christian nationalism. And so it's not as if there's just one segment of the population that are quote unquote Christian nationalists and the rest of us are just fine.
In fact, nobody identifies himself or herself, oh, I'm a Christian nationalist.
Very few.
They say I'm a Christian. Oh, and by the way, here, I'll pass out the AK-15s or whatever.
Or I'm a Christian and I think the government should espouse Christian values. Or I think the Constitution is divinely inspired. Or I think Christians should have a special role here and do have a special. Those are markers.
Let me so that's exactly, I didn't say it that well. So that strain in Christianity, which comes up repeatedly in the courts, and the Supreme Court has been especially solicitous toward. Do you actually align it with the sort of more violent episodes that you're talking about, or do you see it as two sort of fundamentally different problems, the increasing, intervention of government and religion on the one hand, and the bastardization, maybe you could say, of religion, Christianity in particular, to turn violent on the other?
I think it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
I think that they are connected. So, and I think fundamentally it is about an understanding or a misunderstanding of the proper role of religion in government. If we think it's government's job to prop up religion or to convert people or to somehow get involved in religious affairs, those are examples of Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
And then, but once that ideology is festering, their violence can come from that, right? But there are millions of Americans out there who are furthering Christian nationalism who would never be violent. But we have to see them as connected. And if we don't get at the underlying ideology. So to your question about strategy, we are wanting to go into houses of worship because this is present in pretty much every house of worship to some degree, and to really ask Christians to have some good self-reflection about where has Christian nationalism impacted my own theology, our own theologies, our own worship practices. You know, an example of Christian nationalism in a house of worship is just the presence of the American flag on the altar.
Right.
You know, this merger again of American and Christian identities. You know, what exactly are we worshiping here? How is this a form of idolatry? So really trying to dismantle Christian nationalism in ourselves, and then with that understanding going out into the broader culture.
Yeah.
So our targets are not the people who, and there are a few people, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, who self-identify as a Christian nationalist. That's not our target, right? That's not our focus in our campaign. Mm-hmm. We are more looking at people at the grassroots, and that's where our campaign is headed, is into some grassroots organizing and to help people on the ground grapple with Christian nationalism, again, in many ways that people in communities across this country are grappling with racism. And those two things are very much related because Christian nationalism provides cover for white supremacy and racial subjugation. It's a more coded way of, again, excluding people who aren't white as being fully a part of being American and belonging. Right.
And there's some really particular challenges you're facing now in the Lone Star State, yeah?
We are. So I recently moved to Texas to be closer to family, but really finding myself at ground zero when it comes to Christian nationalism in the Texas legislature in particular, which just passed a first-of-its-kind bill, as you alluded to earlier, which encourages replacing school counselors in Texas public schools with school chaplains. Yeah. And these chaplains, there are absolutely nothing to even define what a chaplain is, the only requirement being they pass a criminal background check. But they don't have to have any special training to work with children, any kind of licensure. And importantly, there's no restriction on them proselytizing in public schools. And the interest group that is behind this movement, not just in Texas, but around the country to push these school chaplain laws, has stated as their stated goal to, quote, disciple 100 million children into the faith by 2025, and to do it through school chaplains. Wow. So this is an example of Christian nationalism of this inappropriate relationship between religion and government, and targeting our most vulnerable and impressionable citizens, kids in the public schools. And this is such an incursion on religious freedom for those students and their families. And I'm one of them now. You know,
you're a religious family, right? But you think it should be left to parents and or in churches and the like.
Exactly.
Do you encounter much? I wouldn't say, but aggressive pushback. Do you ever come across people who are hostile towards your message and express it?
I mean, sometimes, but I'd say more often than not, I have people who are intrigued or interested in learning more and grateful. I mean, that's what we've really seen with Christians Against Christian Nationalism, grateful for an organized effort of people who express something that they've been feeling for a long time. They are Christians, and the Christianity that they see portrayed in the public square is not at all in line with how they view religion and their understanding of what it means to follow Jesus. And so for them to see that there are other Christians like them in their communities, and also a group that's working to highlight Christian nationalism, not out of hostility to Christianity, but rather out of affection for it and adherence to it, that out of our Christian values, we feel compelled to stand up for our neighbors and to push back against this gross distortion of the faith that really replaces a gospel of love with a false idol of power.
Well put. It's a necessarily short conversation, but for people who are listening who would like to learn more, what's the best thing that they could do?
Well, they can go to christiansagainstchristiannationalism.org, and we're on Instagram and TikTok at End Christian Nationalism. And they can also find us at bjconline.org and at BJC on the Hill.
Amanda, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.